Here's a tree that's not too difficult to identify in the winter times. Okay, notice how that bark's got all these little almost wings coming off it. You look at these branches here. Okay, that right there is winged elm. This is just going to help you with identification. I just came across it and figured I'd shoot a quick blurb on what it looks like. Okay, you can see right there it just has those wings running all the way up and down it. You see that tree, then you know you got winged elm. Here's another little tree for our winter ID. Okay, there's no leaves on it, but it has these red clumps of berries hanging from it right here. Now that right there is sumac. Okay, now there's dwarf sumac, staghorn sumac, smooth sumac. What you do is just look for these red berries and you know that that's sumac, okay? Now sumac's pretty easy to identify because of these red clumps, and like I said, you just need to identify smooth, staghorn, dwarf, figure out the differences. You know, smooth will be smooth up here, staghorn's not. It's more hairy, and that's pretty much how you tell. But before all the rains hit these, you know, and winter comes, you can actually use these to make a lemonade. Alright, you just dunk it in cold water for an hour or so and you have a nice tasty lemonade. Okay, I've had it, it's not too bad. And you want to do it though before all the rains wash away all the good oils in it. So make sure you get it before that. But in the winter time, you know, at least you'll know that this right here, you know, you wonder what these berries are. Well, it's sumac. And I've heard people actually taking these and eating these in the winter for food. I haven't. I'm sure, I guess it would be alright, but you'll have to do some research on that and find that out. But that way you know what these berries are. You see them clumps, you know, way late in the winter that still remain? You probably have sumac, and they're red berries as well. Okay, for our third tree here for winter identification, we have this tree with this smooth looking bark, very, very narrow and not very deep furrows in it. Okay, now first thing I want you to do when you see this tree is take your fingernail, pop a chunk out, you get this green color. Now I want you to smell it. If that smells almost like lemony limey, then you have tulip poplar. Now the older tree has got a little bit more on it and like a little bit more furrows in it. You know, these kind of grow out a little bit, but it's still a very straight growing tree. You can see that that thing just goes straight up, and it just has a nice straight branches that branch right out like that. Okay, once it gets older, you know, you can see there's no branches down here. You know, it doesn't begin branching till a little bit higher up, and that's how it achieves photosynthesis. And these branches here down at the bottom begin to die and fall off, and it's important to know this tree because it provides us with so much as bow drill material, tinder, cordage. It's got a lot to it, okay? It's a good tree to know. So we have tulip poplar here, and that's about the easiest way to tell you have it is just by looking at the smooth bark. You know, it has these very, very unique smooth furrows to them. And the smell, you know, in the summertime it's easy because there's no other leaves out there like that. But for now, it works great just to figure out which tree it is by smelling it. Okay, that smell is key. Once you smell tulip poplar in the summer and you know that's what it is, you'll notice it'll have a very lemony lime, more of a lime kind of smell to it. Okay, you just take your fingernail, get a little bit, take a smell of that. Okay, and you know you have tulip poplar. Alright, so there's tulip poplar. Okay, here's a larger tulip poplar. You know, and I told you these furrows get a little bit deeper, become a little bit more defined, but you can still see that same pattern in there and that same smoothness on the outside of them furrows, okay? So we take our knife here, poke a little chunk in, take our smell. Okay, that's definitely tulip poplar because I have that serious smell of lime. You'd swear there's limes in the room with you. Okay? If you smell this tree, you'll know. And you can see this right here is actually a whole patch of them. You see how straight that tree grows? Just straight up. Okay, and it doesn't branch out until right there. All the way down from there, no branches. This one here is even more defined. Okay, you see it branches out right there. There's one branch. That's the first branch. Okay, and that's how it works. And then it drops all these branches here, which are where you'll get your bow drill material and tinder. You know, you strip that dead bark off these. Like here's a good piece right here. Okay, and this is another way to identify larger trees of this in the winter. Is you just look underneath the tree. What kind of material is it giving you? Okay, this right here is classic tulip poplar tinder. Okay, I just take a little piece of that, rough it up. See how that turns into like a bird's nest? Okay, that's what it'll do. And that's where you're going to get your good tinder, and it should just pop right off for you like that. Okay, here's another one that's got a lot of it. You can see this is even better than the other one. This one really peels off. Okay, and you can see it's wet though, so you wouldn't want to use this one. But you can see that it's real fibery. Rough it up and it just turns into a little bit of a bird's nest. Okay, so that tells me, okay, there's two identification properties there. I know I have a tulip poplar now. So, smell, branches underneath, grows straight up. It's one of the tallest trees in North America. Now back in there, it's all cedar and pine in there, okay? And that'll be another tree we'll just quickly discuss. It's very easy to identify all your red cedars and your pines. Okay, they're evergreens, so they're always going to have some needles and leaves on them. Okay, here's some cedar. You can see these are them young needles on there. See how them are more pointy? Okay, and that means it's a young one. You can see the bark on here. We can get our good tinder from this. Scrape that bark there. You see that little bit of fine fiber scraping off. Okay, and you can see that red tinge to it. Tells me I have red cedar. And on the core in here, once you get down past all the outer bark that's red, there's an inner core that's red. On the branches especially. Okay, now here's a larger one. Okay, here's some cedar. Alright, here's another one here. You know, there's cedar all throughout here. And then these needles will begin to turn into your classic cedar needles once it gets growing here. Spring's just around the corner, and then it'll grow those little branchlets. Okay, so there's some cedar. I'm sure most of you know what pine looks like. There's a huge pine tree right there. You see them needles? Pine cones. Okay. Evergreens are the easiest to figure out first when identifying in the winter. Okay, now pine trees, I told you, are evergreens. Like I said, most of you probably know what a pine tree is and what it looks like. But one thing you can do to identify the different species is look at the bark. Okay? They all have different types of barks. Alright? Pine cones are usually different, needles are usually different. Now your white pine will have smooth bark. Virginia and red pines and yellow pines, they all have more of a fraily bark. Some of them have more of a furrowed bark. Okay? So get to know your different barks, and then you can tell the differences between each pine tree. That's the best way to learn the difference, is the bark itself. Okay, here's another variation of a pine tree. You can see this bark is slightly different than the other bark, which is right there. Okay, this one has those plates on it. Okay, this one is more flaky. It's got real small flakes to it. Okay, so just remember that. Look at the different barks and you'll know which pine tree you have. Okay, now what about this tree? Maybe some of you recognize this right here. It's not a birch. Okay, this is a sycamore. Alright, also really easy to identify in the winter. Okay, if I can get in on this branch here, I can possibly get the color scheme. See how that's blotchy? Okay, that's what you're looking for there. That blotchy color, it's got green, white, gray, and then you go on the main trunk and it almost looks sick, like it's dying. The bark's falling off. Very, very easy tree to identify. There is a tree that looks similar that grows, just, let me show you here. See them pods on the tree there? This one grows one, single. The other one grows two together. I can't remember the name of it, but I know there's one that can misidentify people, but more than likely you have a sycamore. Just look for those single pods up there. But that's a sycamore, and at the base on these larger ones, okay, you can see at the base here, we need to watch out for this. I'll go over this in 2 seconds here. This here gets kind of rough at the bottom, at the base, okay, but you can see it just peels away on us like this, okay? And that's what sycamores do. But then as it keeps going up, it starts breaking up and gets to that smooth bark, and that's your typical sycamore. Okay, that's what they're usually gonna look like. Here's another sycamore. This one's a little bit smaller. Just another look. See, this one's got that classic color. Sometimes you get a little bit of reds in there, some greens and whites and grays. Okay, so there's another sycamore. Okay, now I know I've shown this before, the winter identification of poison ivy, but since I'm going over some winter trees, we'll do it again. You can see there's a little friend in there. Couldn't tell you what it is. But right here, just so you're aware of it, it's never a bad thing to touch base on this more than once. This vine right here, you see how hairy that looks? Those little tendrils coming off and attaching to the tree are real gnarly and hairy looking. Okay? That right there is poison ivy. If you cut into this, you still can get poison ivy even in the winter. Yes, the oils do go down in the winter. Concentration is not as high of urushiol, but you still can get it, especially if you're highly sensitive to it. Okay, now we go over to this tree. See that vine growing up it? That's another one. See how that thing just snakes up that tree? This looks gnarly, has that grayish, blotchy colored bark. Okay, this one to my left here is dead. This one over here is not. Someone cut this one. See that lighter gray colored bark? Alright, that is poison ivy. Anytime you see this hairy mess like that, your best bet is to stay away from it. Okay? I've encountered enough of these vines to know what it looks like. That would be poison ivy. It's actually quite easy to identify in the winter time. Now don't be fooled by other ones. Think millipede, not centipede. Millipedes got a lot of legs. Centipedes only have a few thicker legs. So like Virginia creeper, crossvine and such, they have a thicker tendril and not as many as this right here, okay? So you'll notice that if you keep studying on these vines like this, you'll know the difference. Alright? And Virginia creeper tends to have a whiter or redder, like a more red color tendril sticking to the tree. Okay? Crossvines, the ones I've seen, are kind of white. But those are the ones that cling to the tree, okay? Not all vines cling to trees like this. The poison ivy does. So there you have it with that. Another look at the winter ID of poison ivy. When we look down here, we can see this crossvine. Okay, you see how these little white tendrils right there will grab? See that? Whoop. See those little white tendrils right there? Okay. That's how you can tell it isn't poison ivy, you know, and it keeps the leaves all winter long. Okay, they usually grow like that right there. See them little white tendrils all down here. It's more like a millipede, or more like a centipede, not a millipede. Not as many hairs. So if you see this one, you don't have to worry about it being poison ivy. It's crossvine. If you ever wonder what this little plant down here that almost looks like cedar leaves, but it always sticks to the ground, well, it is called ground cedar. Okay. Grows in little patches, little systems hooked together like that right there. Okay. Just a quick little tidbit, just if you're ever wondering what it is, it's ground cedar. Okay. Usually you'll see it in huge patches. This is a nice small little patch with a couple stragglers. Give you a nice close-up look at them. There you have it, ground cedar. Okay, so all throughout the winter, you'll notice this tree here still has all its leaves on it. They're dead, but they're still on the tree. So what does that mean when we see this tree that has a lighter colored leaf, that smooth bark, and it's the only tree in the forest that still has leaves on it? Okay, we open this leaf up. You can see it's got that, comes to a lance kind of shape here. Okay, this here is a beech tree. Alright, very, very easy to identify. Okay, you can get some beech nuts come October after the first frost. Alright, and these leaves are very light colored. They're not, you know, you can see all these ones on the ground are a little bit darker. Well, this one here is a little bit lighter, and it gives you a bonus in the winter time because it holds all its leaves. It's one of the only trees I've ever seen that does that. A few oaks will hold on to a couple, but that's about it. Okay, and you can see that bark's real smooth, and they all look about the same from young to old. Okay, so there's an easy one for you to go find. That's a beech. Okay, another tree we can look at here. See this one that has all these pieces of bark sticking out? This is a younger one, it's not super old. Well, this here is Shagbark Hickory. Okay, you can see that does that all the way almost to the top, and then it slenders out a little bit. But this bark here just kind of starts peeling out. It's very rough, very tough. Okay, it's not, you know, pliable by any means. It just breaks. Okay, so if you come across a tree like this, you might have there's other trees that do resemble this. Here, like I mentioned earlier, some oaks tend to hold their leaves like this one did, and this one, and this one. Okay, and if they hold their leaves, there's a few things you got to look at if you want to identify it. Okay, you can search which ones hold their leaves. Okay, this here's a red oak. Pretty sure it's a southern red oak. If I could get a real good view of those leaves, I could tell, and that's the thing, you got to find one that shows you the point. Red oaks come to a point, white oaks are blunt on the end, rounded. Okay, but another thing you can look at is the base of the tree. Sometimes the identification feature is, does the tree, you know, bow out at the bottom of the base like this? Okay, find which oaks do that. Take a good close look at the bark. Get these rectangular shapes in here, okay? And that's what you need to do to find which oaks you have. But I just wanted to point this out just so you're not confused with the beech tree. You know, you see these leaves are more of a reddish color, okay? A lot darker. I know the sun's causing a glare and it's hard to see, but they are. Okay, so there's an oak.